Hello, and welcome to part 3 of our Parent, Guardian, and Trusted Adult YouTube series. My name is Christy Jones, and I am the Prevention and Health Promotion Worker in Chilliwack. I'm located at 80 Rundle and Chilliwack Middle School, and I provide supports to our feeder elementary schools as well as our transitions to high school. I'd like to start off by acknowledging that we are on the unceded ancestral territory of the Coast Salish people. Today, I'll be taking you through a presentation that we typically show to our middle school students, grades 6 to 8. Let's get started. So my presentation is going to focus on myth-busting substances for middle school age students. The information I'm going to share today is typically what our team would share with students ages 11 to 14, which typically fall into the middle school grades of 6 to 8. Depending on where you are, that might mean that they are in middle school, or it might mean that they are in late elementary, early high school. The information that we are going to discuss today aligns with the BC school curriculum that's being covered by teachers in the PE and health classes. This information supports what teachers are already covering with their students and also enables them to continue the conversation. So a little bit about PCRS, or Pacific Community Resources. We are an agency that provides a variety of programs from various funding streams. The addictions programs are funded by Fraser Health, and my program works in partnership with Chilliwack School District. My contact information is up there, and it'll be at the end of today's presentation. Parents or guardians are able to reach out to me via text message or phone, email, social media, etc. So we're going to start off, or how we typically start off, is giving students a basic overview of what a substance is, and we discuss the differences between illegal versus legal drugs. When we ask them what is a drug, we're looking for a definition of any substance or food that is not food or nutrients that's taken into the body and changes the way that we act, think, or the way that we feel. And we have lots of different examples of legal versus illegal substances, and usually we get students to come up with some of their ideas around those. We really want to focus on destigmatizing the word drug, as it's typically viewed as in a negative way. And we want to talk about how substances can affect us both negatively but also positively. So we talk about how drug misuse might be using a substance that's causing physical, emotional, legal, or social harm, whereas beneficial drug use would be using a drug or a substance that provides good or helpful results. So we talk about stabilizing a mood, treating a disease, so on and so forth with the youth. We then will typically simplify our substances and explain how they each are separated into 3 different categories based on how the substances interact and affect our bodies. We don't cover all of the substances with middle school youth, and we tend to focus more on substances that are widely used, that are seen in pop culture or are seen in the media. So this is the list of substances that we cover with middle school age. We have cocaine, alcohol, LSD or acid, 2 different types of caffeine, so the energy drink, but also the coffee, crystal meth, Molly and or ecstasy, mushrooms, nicotine, and you'll see that we have the old school cigarette and the new school vape, as well as cannabis and heroin and opioids. So we categorize we tell the students that we categorize the substances into the 3 categories: uppers, which are also stimulants, so speed up the central nervous system; downers, which are also depressants, so slow down the central nervous system; and all-arounders or hallucinogens, which can be kind of unpredictable but can also cause hallucinations. So we give these categories to the students, and then we ask them to arrange all of these substances into those categories based on how they might affect someone. We usually do this in small groups with the students in order to get them to work together, to critically think, to share their knowledge or the information that they might have heard with each other, and then we give them the answers. So moving on, This would be the answers for the uppers or the stimulant category. So we go into a little bit more depth about the categories. So we talk about how uppers or stimulants would speed up the central nervous system, increase your heart rate, decrease your appetite, increase your alertness. They might cause difficulties with sleeping. They have a strong psychological dependence. So we talk to students about what psychological dependence versus physical dependence is. So psychological dependence, we go into basically that their thoughts are going to be consumed about using one of these substances, especially if they've been consuming it quite frequently. We also talk about how ecstasy and Molly generally does contain a lot of crystal meth. Molly or ecstasy is typically a pressed pill or a capsule that is kind of combined with a lot of different substances and marketed as Molly or ecstasy. The next category that we talk about is the downer or the depressant category. So you'll see we have alcohol and heroin and opioids in this category. They slow down your central nervous system. They slow down your heart rate and your breathing. They lower body temperature and they make you drowsy and put you at risk for something like coma. They have the strong psychological dependence, but also the physical dependence. So we talk to the youth about a physical dependence is when your body becomes really used to having the substance, and then once it's removed or when you stop using, then you might experience some negative physical effects. So we call that typically withdrawal, but those effects could be having a headache, having a stomach ache, maybe having sweats or cold, clammy hands, that sort of thing. We also talk to the students about what binge drinking is. A lot of the times, middle school students will have an idea of what alcoholism or an alcoholic might look like, but they don't know what the term binge drinking is. And so the term binge drinking is considered having 5 or more drinks if you are male or 4 or more if you are female in one sitting. And so we talk to the students about the intent with binge drinking is typically to get very intoxicated. And we talk about some of the risks that are associated with that and some of the safety concerns that come with binge drinking. The last category is the all-arounders or the hallucinogens. So like I said, these can be very unpredictable. They can affect perceptions, emotions, and mental process, and they can distort your senses and can cause hallucinations. So again, you see the ecstasy and the Molly in there because like I said, depending on what is in that pill or in that capsule can really make them unpredictable. And we're not really sure kind of what the full effects are going to be based on that mixture. Now, if you were paying attention, you might have noticed that cannabis did not fall into any of those categories. And the reason for that is it was a little bit of a trick question. Cannabis actually has its own category. And the reason for that is that it can produce the hallucinogen properties. It also has the downer or the relaxation effect, and it increases the heart rate. So that's the upper or the stimulant effect. We know that cannabis affects a short-term or a person's short-term memory. It also affects reaction and coordination. So we really stress with the students that it definitely impairs them similar to that of drinking and driving. We know that cannabis is both physically and psychologically addictive, and that users can experience severe anxiety with high doses, which can potentially cause panic attacks, paranoia, and psychosis. We really stress that point with the youth because with cannabis becoming legalized, if you're over the age of 19, there's some misconceptions around cannabis. And so we really talk to students about the fact that it's not legal if you are under the age of 19, and that also high levels of THC, which is the main chemical in cannabis that produces the high levels of THC can actually produce some of that anxiety. And so if youth are using for the first time, using something that has a high level of THC can cause some of those side effects. So this is the continuum of use that I use when working with students. I go through each of the stages. So no use, they're not using the substance or they're currently not using a substance or this substance. Experimental use, they've used the substance once or twice, but they don't have any real plans to use again. Social use is maybe using on the weekends every now and again with friends. Regular use, the substance has become part of their daily life. Problematic or harmful use is when the substance use is starting to interfere with a different area in their life. So maybe it's affecting their schoolwork, or they're not showing up to work on time, that sort of thing. They're losing interest in their hobbies. Dependent use is when the substance use has causing some significant issues in their lives. When I do this with students, I have them think about the continuum of use, but I get them to rate their cell phone use, tablet use, or electronic use, as well as video game use, exercise, and junk food consumption. I find that this helps the students to critically think about how their use in one of those areas fits into the continuum of use that we use with substances. This kind of allows them to identify if they need to make changes, what they're doing that's maybe healthy or maybe unhealthy behaviors, and maybe they need to look at making some changes. Okay, I'm just going to play a short 3-minute clip about the documentary Rat Park. What we've learned about addiction is that environment plays a big role, and this is typically what we would share with some of our middle school students to sort of start the conversation around what causes addiction.
What causes drug addiction? We think the answer is obvious. Drugs have strong chemicals that make our bodies dependent on them. But journalist Johan Hari discovered that there is more to it. The messages in this video are based on his book, Chasing the Scream: The First and Last Days of the War on Drugs. In the 70s, a research experiment found that when a rat is put in an empty cage, all alone with 2 water bottles, one normal and one drugged, it gets addicted to the drugged water and eventually dies of malnutrition. The experiment was seen as proof that drugs are uncontrollable, and it laid the foundation for 40 years of drug policy, with strict laws, rehab centers that focused on withdrawal, and a massive war on drugs, making it clear that drugs are bad. What most people don't know is that in the same decade, another scientist, Professor Bruce Alexander, thought it was obvious that lonely rats in boring cages would choose drugs over water. So he put them in a rat park, a lush cage with friends and everything a rat could want, while still having free access to drugs. Surprisingly, his rats chose not to use the drugs. The researcher even took the study one step further and had the rats use drugs for 57 days in the lonely cage until they became heavily addicted, and then placed them in the rat park. Astonishingly, the rats gradually reduced their drug use until they stopped using them altogether and lived the rest of their lives drug-free. Experiments like these happen to humans all the time. One example is in hospitals, where heavily injured patients are given a medical form of heroin. This heroin is much stronger than the heroin used by street addicts. Despite months of use, these medical users just stop when they go home to a life where they are surrounded by a loving family. The same drug, used for the same length of time, turns street users who were alone and unhappy into desperate addicts. The rat park experiments didn't show that chemical addictions don't exist, but it showed that they are not the only thing that matters in drug abuse. Maybe a person's access to a functioning social life and a lush cage are even more important than continuing the war on drugs mission of making drugs unavailable and penalizing the users. Thank you for watching this minute video series on public health. For easy understanding, we have included some simplifications, so please make sure to check out chasingthescream.com for the full story and stuartmcmillan.com for an awesome comic strip about the experiments. Please leave your thoughts about the rat park and suggestions for future topics in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
So when we play that clip, we talk to the students about how they can create their own rat park. What would their community look like? What kind of things would they need for positive connection, a sense of belonging, and so on and so forth. All right, so the next thing that I'm going to quickly talk about is naloxone. Naloxone reduces harm. Naloxone is a medication that can temporarily reverse the effects of an opioid overdose and allow time for medical help to arrive. PCRS provides naloxone training to youth and adults for free. And essentially, what we do is train youth and adults to become first responders for their peers. Naloxone helps to educate others, and it helps to destigmatize language and reduce stigma and shame. So I'm just going to leave you with a couple of suggestions before I head off for today. So basically, if you're looking to start the conversation with the youth that you are caring for, you want to find the right moment. Take advantage of situations where you can talk to them about substances, discuss the facts, and correct any misconceptions that they might have. Remember to be patient and be ready to listen. Definitely utilize any external supports that you have, either an outside agency, PCRS, myself, a school counselor, anything like that. Utilize some of the websites that will be at the end of this presentation in our QR code with some tips and suggestions, as well as some facts that you might want to share with the youth that you are working with or the youth that you are a parent or guardian of. And just remember to strike up the conversation again, because the conversation needs to continue and have an open dialogue. All right, thank you for tuning into our YouTube series again this month. We'll have a new topic posted next month and a variety of topics that will continue throughout the summer months. If you have any further feedback or you would like to take part in our survey, please click the link in our bio and help us come up with different ideas that you might be interested in hearing about. At the end of this video, there will also be our QR code that you can utilize to access any additional supports or resources in your community. Thank you.